Thank you for joining us for this history talk sponsored by the Champaign County History Museum. We are recording the presentation. I'm Perry Morris, Vice President of the museum. I thank Chris Gimble, Connor Munson, and Alan Arnold for their assistance tonight. Please type any questions you have into the chat and we will answer them at the end. Today's presentation, inspired by two remarkable aunts, is presented by Delora Seibrecht. Delora worked 13 years at the Citizens Bank of Tolono that was later bought by Busey. She was cashier and officer, secretary to the president, and secretary to the board of directors. That job led her to the city of Urbana, where she worked 29 years as division head of the finance department, comprised of the municipal collector's office, financial services, and the parking division. Now in retirement, one of her activities is acting as treasurer of the Champaign County History Museum. So let's begin. Take it away, Delora.
Screen there. Oh, in the video screen.
Uh-oh.
Go back to this one. Oh, it's right here. Slideshow and
Where?
yeah, and then from beginnings.
Where's that at?
Right here. Okay.
I think we're ready. Now what happens?
Did you press share screen?
It says you are sharing.
Yep. Then you
Yeah, I'm seeing the PowerPoint. You're
We
good.
see it, Laura.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Here we go. I'm going to talk about my two remarkable aunts tonight. First of all, I just wanted to tell you why this program is, because we're honoring women in history this month of March, and which we know that was started many years ago. And in 1987, Congress passed the public law that we would honor women in March. And the month is spent honoring women's contributions in American history. The women celebrated have worked to further women's rights to vote, equal treatment, and pay at their jobs, serve in the militia, run for political office, and fulfill their ambitions no matter the challenges. But today, I'm going to talk about two ordinary women in my family that lived and worked in Champaign County. Although they did not work in the fields of the women described above, each of my aunts in very different ways influenced me in my life choices. They are Mary Lou Brown and Nedra Weeks Brown. I'm going to give you some family histories. The Brown family moved to Southern Illinois from Kentucky sometime in the early 1800s. Wayne County is still one of the poorest areas of Southern Illinois. The landscape and soil quality were not great for growing or making a living farming. So in 1925, my grandparents, Ogie and Elsie Brown, gave up farming and moved the family, Maxine, Ogie Jr., and Kenneth, to Champaign County. Their oldest son, Merle, stayed on the farm with his grandfather, John Brown. And the youngest of five siblings, Mary Lou, was born February 14th, 27 in Champaign County. My grandparents never owned a house or a vehicle. The Depression years were very hard on them. Kind of ran off the page here. The Illinois Central Railroad was considerably reduced. Working at the railroad was considerably reduced at the time. Food was spread very thin among the family of six, as was clothes and shoes and most other things essential for life. The houses they rented had many layers of newspaper on them to cover the cracks and block cold air. In the summer, to escape the stifling heat, they would drag mattresses to sleep in the yard. Once a week, water was heated in a tub and everyone took a bath, starting with the adults and each of the children in the same bathwater. I do remember my Aunt Mary Lou, which is the youngest one in this picture that I'm sharing, complaining about that a lot. She was always the last one in the bathwater. So that's the Browns. The Nobles, John Noble, my great-grandfather, originally from England, and Mary Duffin, my great-grandmother from Ireland, had recently married and were looking for land to build a home and start a family. John and Mary each purchased 40 acres of farmland in 1869 from the Illinois Central Railroad. Crittenden Township land was very flat and rich, black dirt, and is excellent for farming. The township is surrounded by the towns of Tolono, Philo, Pesotum, and Villa Grove. The farm was self-sufficient, providing beef, pork, and chicken from their own stock, a large vegetable garden, and various fruits and nut trees. Income from selling grain provided everything else. They raised 5 children. No one in the family was ever hungry or lacked good clothing or shoes. The house was well maintained and they slept in warm beds. My grandfather, Frank Noble, and wife, Lula Campfield, were the next generation. They had 5 children, and by the time I was born in 1950, their 3 sons, Frank, Bernard, and Wilfred, were successfully farming 600 acres that supported 4 families. And then there were the Weekses. My aunt Nedra was one of 5 children born in Champaign in 1926 to Paul Weeks and Esther Cooper. Paul worked for the Champaign Police Department and Esther was a housewife. Nedra did go to high school and enjoyed activities and graduated from Champaign High School in 1945. So she's my second aunt there. Nedra enjoyed school and participated in school activities, graduating from Champaign High School. I'm missing a page here, I think. Here it is. Sorry. A little bit out of order. Education of my aunts. No one in either the Brown or the Noble family went to school beyond the 8th grade. The Noble children attended a one-room schoolhouse supported by residents within the Stringtown School District, and my grandfather oversaw. After 8th grade, it was time for the Noble children to work on the farm. My father, Bernard, was a very talented musician. His teacher encouraged him to continue lessons with a U of I music professor, but my grandfather said no. Education for the Brown children was even much less encouraged, and they all left school after 8th grade or earlier. Mary Lou, the youngest of the Brown children, was left-handed, and school was particularly difficult for her. Teachers at the time insisted that left-handed children learn to write right-handed, and punishment came with the inability to do so. Mary Lou was extremely lacking in math and writing skills and received no support from home. My grandparents were not well educated themselves and neither had time to spend on helping with schoolwork. Aunt Mary Lou left school as soon as legally possible. Uncle Kenny, next to the youngest, was the only sibling that wanted to go to high school, but was told he had to go to work to help support the family, and he did. Michael Oral Brown, my first cousin, was the first generation to graduate from high school on either side of my family in 1962. My grandfather bought him a suit. The entire Brown Noble family attended the graduation ceremony and party afterward. Here, this is the Brown children. And this is the Brown children growing up. You can see them all there. And this is my grandfather, who is shown in his, not his first job on the Illinois Central Railroad. He was a brakeman, but here he is as a conductor. And this is my Aunt Mary Lou. Okay. To just I need to pause just a moment here and get my pages in order. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to talk about relationships between the Browns and the Nobles. They came about in the mid 1940s when Noble brothers married Brown sisters. My father, Bernard Noble, married Maxine Brown, and my father's younger brother, Wilfred Noble, married Mary Lou Brown, my mother's younger sister. Then Uncle Kenny Brown married Nedra Weeks, who were sweethearts since junior high. That could have been a contributing factor in him wanting to attend high school, but was not allowed. When they all married there, it made Maxine, Mary Lou, and Nedra all sister-in-laws. The two aunts, Mary Lou and Nedra, both influenced me in many ways. From being young at heart, no matter how old, seeking education and pursuing a career of my own, how to present a professional appearance, always willing to learn something new, and how important it is to treat people well. So here are their stories. This is my Aunt Ned's picture in her senior picture in high school. So Nedra enjoyed school and graduating from Champaign High School in 1945. Her first job was a telephone operator for Illinois Bell Telephone Company. While working as an operator, she attended a business college here that was in Champaign. I'm just not for sure which one. There were two at the time. But she learned typing, shorthand, and other business skills. While at the telephone company, still working there, an office position became available at the district offices in Champaign. She applied and got the job. Thus began her climb to the top of Illinois Bell management. Aunt Ned became assistant to the general manager of Illinois Bell Telephone District 5 office, a job that she excelled at and that she loved. Nedra had been sweet on my Uncle Kenny since middle school. He served in the Army during World War II, and when he returned, he began working for the Illinois Central Railroad, just as his father had as a brakeman. They married in 1947 and became my Aunt Ned and sister-in-law to my mom, Maxine, and my Aunt Mary Lou. Aunt Ned was the best dresser of anyone in our family. Her hair was always perfect. She polished her nails, wore makeup and jewelry, and dressed in the latest styles. Always tan, she wore shorts and had great looking legs. So I was quite impressed by Aunt Ned at that time, because growing up on the farm, my mother didn't dress like that. So she really impressed me. Okay, that's a duplicate. Okay. Unfortunately, Aunt Ned could not bear children. So I became the favorite niece, which I really did like. And, but it was quite easy because I was the only girl in the family. I would spend weekends at their house occasionally and really enjoyed it. They lived in Champaign, and their home was the nicest and most beautifully decorated home in the family. The Brown family loved playing card games. And when we got together, that's mostly what we did for the rest of the afternoon. Well, when Aunt Ned was sitting out a game, she was always knitting. She knitted Afghan sweaters and all kinds of different things, socks, I remember. So when I was 13, she taught me to knit and crochet, because I always envied her doing that. And I have continued those crafts, making Afghans for my sons and my grandchildren. The Illinois Bell District 5 was eventually combined with another office in the state. And Aunt Ned took retirement. The page is cut off here, so Aunt Ned was not ready to retire, so she took over managing Illinois Bell telephone building services and custodians in Champaign, Urbana. After that position was over, she decided to be she was the president and treasurer of the Champaign Bell Credit Union. She was in the Pioneers. It was an organization for Illinois Bell telephone retirees. So my Aunt Ned did a whole lot of work for the Illinois Bell District in various capacities. When Aunt Ned decided to stop working full-time, she took on part-time jobs, and she chose mostly as sales clerks at the following stores: Robeson's, Lane Bryant, Victoria's Secret, and I cannot remember the name of the jewelry store or the gift shop, but she did sell Brighton jewelry. I remember that. And I may even have forgotten a couple because she did have a lot of jobs. Uncle Kenny and Aunt, let me see here. There's the wedding picture of Uncle Kenny and Aunt Ned. And you can see they're a very nice looking couple. They enjoyed playing golf, and they were devoted fans of Illinois football. They never missed a game. And they did go to the Rose Bowl game in Pasadena, California, which was back in the 60s, I think. So when Uncle Kenny passed away in 1996, Aunt Ned turned to volunteer work at RSVP and the Champaign County History Museum, where she took care of the treasurer's duties and helped staff the museum. And she also worked in the popcorn truck, which I did know that Aunt Ned had volunteered here. I did not know she did the treasurer duties, which is what I do. And so I find that kind of unique and nice that I took after my aunt in more than one way. Let's see. When Aunt Ned passed away, she was always a real private person, and she did not want any visitation or remembrance. And that made me sad because I felt how much she had inspired me in my work and how I advanced. I wanted to be like her, so I wanted to advance in a job, an office job is what I wanted. So I decided to write a Facebook post and posted it on June 3rd, 1917 in her memory. And this is what it said. My Aunt Nedra Brown, who would have turned 91 in July, passed from this world Friday evening. Aunt Ned started working as a telephone operator for Illinois Bell in her teens. She advanced up the workforce to assist the district manager and then facilities manager for Illinois Bell. She broke the glass ceiling at Bell, and I remember there were men that grumbled. After retiring, she ran the Illinois Bell Credit Union and volunteered numerous places. She was a smart, classy lady that kept her mind and body active all her life. Aunt Ned was a great inspiration to me as a teenager in the 1960s, a time when it was difficult for women to advance in upper management. I thank her for showing me the career path women would take. Rest in peace, Auntie Ned. Well, active peace, or you won't be happy. Love, your favorite niece. Let's see here. And there is Aunt Ned and Uncle Kenny in their retirement years. And you can see they're still a very nice, active looking, good looking couple. This is the wedding picture of my next aunt I'm going to talk about, Mary Lou Brown, who is the one on the far right, standing next to Aunt Ned, and Uncle Wilfred, and then Uncle Kenny. So this was taken shortly after World War II was over. I think it was in 47. It was taken. So I'll go on. Okay. It was the mid-1940s and World War II was raging in Europe. Former male jobs were being filled by females. 3 of my Aunt Mary Lou's brothers had worked at Western Union Telegraph Company before serving the military. Mary Lou was 15 when she was hired by Western Union and began delivering telegrams on a bicycle. She made the local Courier newspaper as the first girl in the Twin Cities to deliver telegrams. The photographer that took the pictures asked her, "Can't they get any boys?" And she replied, "What's wrong? What's wrong or so different about a girl riding a bicycle?" Mary Lou enjoyed her time delivering telegrams. She said delivering to Bunny's Tavern to the guys that bet on the horses was her favorite because they always gave her the best tips. Then later, Mary Lou would work at the Robeson department store lunch counter. She was cute, had a perky personality and liked her job, and customers liked her. In later years, chance meetings with the regulars from the lunch counter would always ask, "Didn't you work at Robeson's lunch counter?" Now I'm going to talk about how they all met. My father played piano in a dance band to make extra money. My mother loved to dance and would attend dances somewhere every weekend. That is where she met my father. Mom started bringing her younger sister, Mary Lou, to the dances, and inevitably she met my dad's younger brother, Wilfred. They married in 1947. They actually married before my mom and dad did. They married in 1948. They lived in a rented sleeping room in Champaign with Uncle Wilfred commuting to the farm every day and Aunt Mary Lou continuing to work at Robeson's. Mary Lou became pregnant in 1948 with their son, Wilfred Joseph Jr., and he was born in 1949. Mary Lou quit her job at Robeson's to stay home and raise their son. In 1950, they began construction on their house out on the farm. So the next photos here show them. This is digging that looks like my father there on the tractor. They're digging a basement for the house. And here is Mary Lou helping do the cement block foundation. It had a basement too. And this is what the house looked like when it was done. The house was entirely built by my uncle Wilfred and his brothers Frank and my father Bernard, and Mary Lou and Wilfred moved into their new home in 1952. In the early 1950s, Uncle Wilfred was diagnosed with severe rheumatoid arthritis. Let's see, where's that one? Find my picture. He was accepted into Mayo Clinic in Minnesota for treatment. At that time, doctors were testing medicines to slow the progression of the disease, but had not found the right combination of drugs yet. The arthritis progressed rapidly, requiring Uncle Wilfred to have both hips and both knees replaced and having his wrists and ankle joints fused. And his hands had a lot of arthritis in them too. Uncle Wilfred's days of actively farming were over. And in middle school, Joe, their son, was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and he began treatment. Mary Lou could not take care of her husband, her son, and the egg operation. So I was going to go back up here to the egg operation. This picture shows they had 700 laying hens that they had there close to them, and they gathered eggs every day, and then once a week they were taken down to a distributor down around Charleston, Illinois. But this shows them here they're debeaking chickens which takes the point off their mouth there so they don't injure each other. But it was a big job. It was a lot of physical work. And with Uncle Wilfred's disease progressing and he couldn't work, and it was difficult for her to take over the egg operation entirely. She could do a lot of it, but not all of it. So they ended the egg operation and started looking for a business that they could manage to replace their lost income. Let's see. What they found was the Dog and Suds drive-in restaurant in Philo. It was on route, I think it's 130 that goes through Philo. So in 1962, Mary Lou and Wilfred purchased it and the franchise that went with it. Wilfred managed the business. There's a picture of it. And Mary Lou managed the employees and the daily running of the restaurant. The Dog and Suds was a hangout for local kids and teenagers from Philo, Tolono, and Sydney. It was also a popular eating out spot for families, with Coney dogs and root beer were the top sellers there. Managing teen employees is not an easy job, especially when many customers were teenagers themselves. When boys from Champaign and Urbana would drive down and harass the car hops, Mary Lou was quick to put a stop to it. I can attest to that, as I was a car hop at the Dog and Suds summers through high school. Mary Lou was always young at heart and a second mom to many of her workers. She listened to countless stories of dating and breakups and gave advice to all the girls. And sometimes it was boys too. Teen pregnancy in the 1960s was a black mark for the girl. When faced with that situation with one of her employees, Mary Lou became a second mom, as the girl's mother had recently passed away and her father was having great difficulty coping with what was happening. So that young woman never forgot how Mary Lou supported her during that very difficult time for her. And she kept in contact and visited Mary Lou for the rest of Mary Lou's life. The continuing deterioration of Uncle Wilfred's health and his subsequent bitterness put a severe stress on their marriage, and they separated in 1967 and then divorced. Mary Lou remarried in 1968, and she and her husband, Paul Oblin, and Wilfred ran the Dog and Suds together, which I remember that time. It was kind of difficult sometimes, but they actually managed it and made it all work. Then in 1974, their son, Wilfred Joseph Noble Jr., was tragically killed in an automobile accident. He was the only boy in the Noble family, and his death significantly affected the entire Noble and Brown families. Mary Lou and Wilfred were both devastated. At that time, Mary Lou and Paul bought the Dog and Suds out, Uncle Wilfred's share out, and then they ran the business until 1976 when they sold it. At that point, Mary Lou began work at Monocle's Pizza in Tolono, making pizza doughs and prepping toppings. This is a picture of Joe. He was my double cousin because mothers married brothers. So, and everyone thought we were brother and sister anyway, because we got on the school bus and the houses were just real close to each other and we had the same last name. So he had graduated from Eastern Illinois University, had gotten his bachelor degree. So, okay, then let's see. This is some of the family. This is my mother, Maxine, Uncle Kenny, and Aunt Mary Lou. So they're all siblings. Paul retired from Alltel, the phone company in Illinois in 1991, and Mary Lou, he retired and they began retirement together. They loved country music and traveled to Nashville to enjoy music in the clubs there. They were very involved with the Tolono VFW, Paul being a World War II veteran and officer of the club. Paul passed away in 2007 from lung cancer at age 80, and Mary Lou on June 1st, 2018, from natural causes at the age of 90. Which I always found that was, I don't know, touching in a way that they both passed on June 1st, a year apart. When I think of my Aunt Mary Lou's life, I am awed at all the hurdles she faced. She was brought up in the Depression in a very poor family. She lived through the World War II years, making sacrifices that only the greatest generation knew. Her level of formal education was very, very low in reading and writing and math. And I knew that, but I didn't really know how low it was. Despite that lack of education, she successfully owned and operated a business. And I remember when Paul passed away, I helped her a lot then at that time, and I was helping her clean out some drawers. And she had, there were some papers in this drawer, and I said, "What are these?" And I'm looking at them, and it was cursive handwriting, spelling out like $125 and no cents. And so the page was filled with different amounts on how to write those words. And so I said, "What are these?" And she says, "Oh, Paul did that for me so I could write checks, because he always wrote checks, and he had already taken care of having bills paid automatically online, taken out of her bank account, but she still occasionally had to write a check, and she didn't know the spelling of the words to write out." So that just made a huge impression on me. I mean, I knew she didn't have skills, but that was just really like, wow. But like I said, she, despite the lack of education, she was successful. She was beloved by the people that she was the boss for. She was young at heart her entire life, always ready to have a good time with family and friends. She was loved by the employees she mentored at the Dog and Suds. They never forgot how she treated them, and many of them visited her for the rest of her life. For me, she was my fun aunt. My mom, who was 10 years older, just felt older. But Mary Lou was young. She was younger than my mom when she got married, and so she'd had children younger and everything. And my mom was serious all the time. So, but Aunt Mary Lou would ride a bicycle with me. We could go on an amusement ride. She'd put on a crazy costume. She'd tell me slightly racy stories. She'd let me sip a beer. And she showed me how to be kind and listen to others, which she'd heard a lot of stories from all those teens that worked at the Dog and Suds. And she loved cats, and I do too. So these two aunts are so different. Mary Lou was raised extremely poor and no education, but she did very well in life, successful. She was smart at managing money, and it didn't really show unless you knew. Then Aunt Ned, she was educated, and she wasn't on a farm. There is a difference. When you're on a farm, you don't dress. But I wanted to be I wanted to be Aunt Ned. I didn't want to work on the farm. So, which I couldn't work anyway, because at that time women weren't allowed to. My dad would never let me loose on a tractor doing plowing, planting, or anything. But women nowadays do that. But so I wanted to be Aunt Ned. And so I tried to always, in my jobs, which Perry told you that I worked at a bank. And so I always had office jobs. And so I always, besides the dog and suds, I mean, I did have high school jobs, like I worked at Monocle's Pizza, making pizzas and stuff like that. But I raised my family. I had 2 sons. And they were very successful in what they're doing. And but I have these 2 aunts. When I was thinking, they asked me if I could talk about something, and I thought these 2 aunts made a huge impression, and they were ordinary, but they were not, because one faced almost impossible odds at being successful because of her education. And my other aunt, she was very successful and actually was working in what men's jobs were at that time. So anyway, do I have any questions? Nope. Am I muted?
I am. Do you want to go? You want to stop sharing the screen?
Yeah. Let me make sure. Oh, there's the family again. This is the Brown family, and you can just tell they were poor. But one thing I did forget to mention when I was looking at this picture a little while ago, my mom is on the left in there, and that cap she has on reminded me that she owned a taxi cab, and that was here in Champaign. And she didn't drive it; her brother standing next to her drove it. But when I think of my mom now, I had forgotten she had a business too, so she owned a taxi cab. So let me get out of that. I think that's it. Stop sharing.
Yes, please.
Right. How do I do that?
Share screen down. Oh, there we go.
There it is.
Now
There it
we've
is.
got, I'm gonna go. Since there's so few of us, I'm gonna go back to the gallery view.
Oh, okay.
We've only had one comment in chat, and that was from Jeffrey commenting on Aunt Mary Lou's boots when she was delivering the telegrams.
You know, I put that picture, it was on a genealogy site. It might have been, I don't remember which one. I belong to several of them, but I thought that was kind of a historic picture. And so it was on, it went on, it was showing to people around and everything. And I got comments on it, and that somebody said, I love those boots. And so I said to Aunt Mary Lou, she said, oh, where'd you get the boots? She says, oh, I probably got them. Mom probably got them at the Salvation Army, and they were just made of rubber.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, she said leather cowboy boots.
Yeah. I don't know. No, they weren't. They were just rubber. So, but they always had secondhand clothing and stuff like that. And I remember too, the Salvation Army was furnished them with a turkey and all the meals at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And so.
Okay. Are you able to see the chat, Delora?
Yes.
We're getting, Adrian is saying she agrees with you. They were remarkable and a beautiful way to honor them. And Connor is complimenting on you on the excellent talk and found a moving elegy to your aunts.
Thank you.
Oh, here Renee's making a comment too. Not only are you CCHM treasurer, but you are the popcorn wagon too.
I am. See, I did the same thing. And TJ was just, he just thought that was so cool because he was looking, we've been going through old records here at the museum. We have a lot of interns helping do that. And that's when he found that Aunt Ned acted as treasurer. And I didn't know that. And then there was a picture of her in the popcorn wagon also. And so he thought that was so cool that I was, mimicking her position here.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, here, Jeffrey's wondering if Western Union gave Mary Lou her uniform. Two strong women, each in their own way. Did they have to furnish their uniforms or
Yes,
did they have to buy them?
they didn't have to buy them. They furnished them. And I remember there's a picture, we have a picture here in the museum that has my two uncles that were in it, because they were both at Western Union and then they both went off to war. And that's when that happened. But the museum did feature that picture in our World War II exhibit, which was down in the main room down there. But under our section, what women did in place of men during World War II, how they helped out. And so, and it was a really nice big picture. And the museum gave me that when that exhibit was over with. And I have it in my basement, my family room down there. So Aunt Mary Lou is still very much with me in life size, because it was a life size photo of her.
Delora, this is too long to put in the chat box, but I think you should take a picture of you in the same position as your aunt in the popcorn wagon.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea, Renee.
I think so.
I'll have to ask. She was kind of leaning out. I don't know what TJ did with it. I know he has
Well, I'm
it
sure he
somewhere.
still has it. So I think you should get it and read
Yeah.
it with you in it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Anybody else has any questions, just unmute and ask them. I think you did an excellent job, Delora. I really enjoyed hearing about these ladies. Always like hearing more stories about people that came before us here in the county.
I know.
Especially,
Yeah,
you know, these two great ladies in Women's History Month.
I know. And I just thought, well, there's people around us influence us so much, and sometimes they don't get the credit that,
Yes, sometimes I don't think we realize quite how much sometimes people do influence us until later in life. We, reflect on things.
That's very true.
So Delora, after looking at that picture of her in the World War II room for many, many times, it's nice to get more background on her and to learn about her.
Learn about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I knew from the stories that my mom's side was pretty poor, but see, I grew up out on the farm where you didn't ever worry about food. Farmers were lucky that way. They had their own food. They could grow it themselves or butcher a hog or whatever. So it was much different when the sisters, of course, the Depression was over and the war was over when they met, but they still had, you could always tell that they kind of came from lack of education, so, and I was really surprised that I don't know what the age was back in those days when you could quit school. Did you have to stay into school till 8th grade, or did they let you drop out earlier? Because I know some of my Uncle Merle did not even go that far. He was the one that stayed down with my great grandpa.
I know my
Yeah.
dad, he went as far as 8th grade. He was on the farm too. But I think they could, especially the boys, could drop out earlier if they were needed on the farm.
Yeah.
I don't know about the girls.
Were any of these families in danger of losing the farm during the Depression?
No,
Did they talk about that?
no.
No?
I know they were pretty conservative, but one thing I do remember about during the war was we still had to eat, and somebody still had to farm, and the women physically couldn't do it, especially at that time. The equipment wasn't as automatic and stuff, but they exempted so many young men who, if they were farmers, from going to the war so that they could stay home and farm. but there was a number. There could only be so many of them stay home. And my one uncle had polio, the oldest in the family, and his one side, he had a shortened arm and a leg on one side, and he couldn't farm that well, but he still did. But they didn't take him, but he did work in a munitions plant. And I had an uncle on the other side who'd had a childhood disease that affected his breathing. And so he also worked in a munition plant.
My dad was the only son. He had a sister, but was the only boy in the family, and he didn't have to go.
He didn't have to go. They made it. Yes, that was one thing too. Yeah. That was a hard time. We don't know. I don't know. I hope we never know it, but it wasn't an easy time to live through.
Okay, well, we seem to be winding down. If there's no more questions,
Good job, Delora.
Oh, thank you. I was
Thank
nervous.
you, Delora.
My
You're
first one.
great. You
And I
did
want to thank Connor and Chris, the intern, and Perry for helping me out with the slideshow part, because I had never done a PowerPoint before. So it was a new experience for me. And then scanning photos and getting everything to match up it was kind of a rushed couple hours here before getting it all ready.
well, now
We
that
did
you're experienced, you can crank out all
Oh,
kinds of
yeah, I can
talks.
crank it. I can. Well, thank you all for listening to me.
So yes, thank you all for attending, and we are going to have this available through the website sometime. I think I will go ahead and stop the recording.